Hi everyone and welcome back to SKG Podcast series. Today we've got a very special guest with us, Shree from ANK Corp, one of the leading RTO business and advisory services in Australia. For any of us who are a part of education industry, ANK Corp is not an unknown name. And with Shree today, we're unpacking a very important question for anyone who's looking to enter into the education space. Whether they should be buying an existing RTO or should they look at setting up a brand new RTO. So let's join together to welcome Shree. Hi Shree.
Hi Khush, glad to be here. Hello everyone, this is Shree from ANK Corp. We are an educational advisory firm based here in Melbourne, Australia. We started from 2016 and we're the expertise in acquisition and mergers for RTO, CRICOS and higher education here. So I'm happy to have further discussion on it.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Shree. So let's start with the burning question that we have on hand, whether to buy an existing RTO or should someone be looking at setting up a brand new RTO from scratch. When people come to me with this question, the first thing that I say is it's not about which option is better, but it's more about what is their current situation and what is their timeline and the risk appetite in the given scenario. So can you tell us a little bit more about the pros and cons of both the situations?
Yes, Khush, you're definitely right. So there's a couple of things you need to first understand. When you're setting up a new RTO, you obviously have full control towards it, which means you get a higher compliance scrutiny under your control to choose what courses you want as well with the locations. There's a lot of things you can customize as per your requirement. However, when you're buying, there's an advantage, which is having an existing platform to get up and running from next day on. You get a system, you get a scope, you might have agents already in place. So it just depends, I believe, on how quickly you want to start delivering as an RTO provider.
That's absolutely right, Shree. And I think the real challenge is also about managing the expectations around it, because some people think that buying would mean that there is no compliance backlog or no compliance baggage. And sometimes people also think that setting up would mean that they will get it cheaper in the long run. But I think both the options, they have some hidden layers that we need to unpack and we need to understand before reaching a conclusion of which option is actually better. So let's talk about the due diligence on that note. What are the things that the buyers really need to be checking before signing anything, Shree?
So first of all, since you're buying the existing RTO, which obviously has a history to some point, the first thing you need to check is compliance with ASQA. So to do that, obviously Khush would be the expert, but you need to look into their compliance report, their training assessment strategies, how are their scopes registered, whether they're validated or not, renewed, up to date. There's a lot of aspects in compliance. Not only that, when I say compliance, you also need to check how their system is in place. It could be LMS or SMS, whether they have the records. Another position would be for financial, whether they have been up to date with their revenues, their tax returns. Is there any liabilities that would be carried over by this new purchaser? Furthermore, you need to understand what is included in the part of sale. So it could be physical assets or intellectual properties, along with the learning materials and other resources on it. After you have done a thorough due diligence on the compliance and financial perspective, you need to make sure what you're getting aligned with the contracts. For example, your lease that takes place or your staff agreement. That could be partnership deal that you're carrying over, continuing with the business. Once you're done with the lease part or any other contracts has been ticked off, you need to make sure you are the right person to be ticked by ASQA as a new fit and proper ownership. So that's a couple of things I would say to make sure.
That's right. And I think if I look at it from the compliance lens, it's not just about what's there, it's also about what's missing from the acquisition that is happening. For example, if there are no clear strategies in place or if the student records are missing as part of the handover, then in the long term, the onboarding buyer is going to have challenges meeting the requirements of the standards moving forward. Okay, so let's navigate through the common RTO challenges. What are the systems that they need to be looking at? If you can just throw some light around the common RTO challenges as part of the transition.
Sure, Khushbu. I think the first is to keep systems updated. When I say that, for an example, an RTO might have recorded their students in 6 different Excel sheets. But from compliance point of view, it might be difficult to submit an awareness reporting. So if an RTO has a proper LMS or SMS in their system or have any other platform being used that could extract the documents in one go, I think it's going to be easier to carry on the compliance moving forward. Another could be, let's say, what courses are approved in the RTO has to also have similar delivery skills moving forward for those buyers. For example, if someone is buying an RTO having individual support, aged care, disability on scope, it's important that the incoming person has same expert or have same placement agreements, have a trainer in place to deliver those courses as a compliant way to the students.
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, I think that's major tick boxes here.
Yep. And I think one of the biggest traps that I also seen when people are buying the RTO, they would usually go for something that is cheaper. You're the best person to advise on that. If we look at if we do not look at the compliance gaps as part of the transition that is happening, then it can cost them a lot more in the long term if that is ignored at the time of the acquisition. Do you agree, disagree to that?
Completely agree to it, Khushbu, because when you're buying a business, you're buying the ongoing business that is happening. There must be students enrolled, there must be trainers involved. So it's important to maintain as it is. Once the sale happens, there's always a fear, I believe, in the company staffs and employees and the students that, who are my new management team? So we need to make sure the person understands, does not disturb the classes or any other activities that is ongoing at this stage to make sure the business is sustainable as it is and helps to grow as well.
Yeah. No, definitely. I think the industry and the student expectations definitely need to be managed very well as part of the transition. And we should also not forget that under the 2025 standards, student protection and transparency are definitely in the center of the standards now. We need to make sure that all the student information and documents and assessment records, they're properly transitioned as part of the acquisition as well. The timeline for that has also gone up, so we need to be aware of that as well. So if you buy an RTO and don't manage that transition very well, you're not just risking the compliance part, but you're also risking the whole registration, because when it comes to a performance activity, it's not going to be considered that it's the new management, so the previous compliance can be ignored, because you're buying the registration of the organization, so you carry whatever is attached to the organization. So let's have a look at the trends and what's changing now, Shree, because I think everyone in the industry wants to understand, with the shift in the standards, with so much of unrest in the last year within the industry, where are we headed towards now?
Well, I think RTO has become more attractive than before. One, since ASQA has been bit stricter on the new applications, it is making buying an RTO more attractive to people who want to go immediately.
Yeah.
Another, sellers are also maintaining their compliance to point, having all the training assessment strategies, validating themselves, having this LMS systems and any other asset which is important for compliance on place, which makes buyers comfortable and confident to sort of analyze and possibly get into the business. Another thing, I also think, because there is such a skill shortage, there's a lot of demand obviously in this education sector, so I see it actually moving positive.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think we also have encountered that the days of buying a shell or a skeleton RTO, that is not going to work in today's scenario, because if there is no prior trading activity, and that trend of, just having the registrations and buying and selling the RTOs, that's not going to move on moving forward. What do you think about that?
No, you're absolutely right. Since last year, once ASQA has mentioned the lapse notice to be announced if there is no activity,
Hmm.
that has given one first motivation for the current owners to start really working on it.
Yeah.
And having said that, it is an advantage for the upcoming buyers to know how much transaction they have done, how much effort they have done, and to what level they could potentially push this business and
Yeah.
grow.
Yeah, no, very true. And I also think that ASQA is also watching all these transfers very closely. So if you are buying an RTO, you need to be ready to show that you can actually run it. You've got the capability, you've got the team behind you to actually balance it out and manage the operations moving forward in a compliant manner. So let's have a look at how will ANK help the buyers? What are the things that you can assist the buyers with?
Sure. So first thing, as we started as well in this conversation, I would take a initial consulting session with them just to understand which pathway is the best, either it's buying or registering a new one. That would help us to define what options we can explore. And if it is mostly buying, then I would understand their requirement, which could be locations or scope, the
Yeah.
compliance perspective, how big of an operation you want to take. A lot of things comes in play. I would make sure that's confidential and find some suitable options for them.
Yeah.
I would ask an expert like yourself to do a due diligence on the RTO,
Yeah.
which would give inside reports to understand how the future of the RTO looks like in long term, because it's a big investment. They would be doing it, obviously. Once that is done, we have a solicitor here and accountant who would make sure all the legal perspectives are done.
Mm.
That would include the sale purchase contracts being reviewed, drafted, basic paperwork being made and lodged, obviously.
Yeah.
I would make sure a handover and transition is done. It's just not only about the industry transition or the organizational team, but it's also giving a transition on how the compliance should be maintained moving forward so that the RTO does not have any issues with ASQA.
Oh, definitely. And that is so important because most of the buyers, they are either, from some other industry or they're unfamiliar with the RTO world. So having a structured support means that they'll have less surprises and they'll have a very clean start, which definitely helps them to grow in a proper manner moving forward. So, Shree, before we wrap up, if someone's listening to us and is considering to enter into the RTO market, what's your one piece advice for them?
The first thing is do not rush. It's very important to understand the compliance of an RTO you're buying. So I would say get a consultant to do a due diligence and a proper due diligence. Once you have understood the compliance risk for the RTO, then make a clear decision about it.
Very nicely put, Shree. Thank you so much for that. And anyone who's needing help for the transition to the new revised standards, you can reach us at skgconsulting.com.au. And anyone who is looking to buying a new RTO, they can get in touch with Shree. We will leave the QR codes and the contact details at the end of the session, but you can also look them up on ankcorp.com.au. Thank you so much for joining in today, and we look forward to having you for the next session. Thank you, Shree.
Thank you, Khush.